Good morning, Mr. Cass.
Good morning, Mr. Henley. How the devil are you, sir?
I am extraordinarily well, thank you. And man, thank you so much for doing this. I don't really understand why people do this anymore. We know why you're doing this. You're doing this because Robert told me to speak to Barnaby, who told me to speak to you. And because you're all brilliant people, you just agree to do it. And
I have FOMO, Martin. So if I'm seeing people I like and respect doing something, I want a piece of the action too. So it was pure FOMO.
Excellent. God bless FOMO. Good. Okay, so what that means, of course, is that I don't know you at all. This is the first conversation we've ever had. We've been chatting already for 15 minutes, but this is the first conversation we've ever had. So I'm really interested to find out more about you and what it is that you're up to. I don't know if you are aware, but there are only 5 questions. So the first question is, how are you qualified to talk to us about marketing? The second question is, who are your clients and what is it that you do for them? And the third question is, how do you feel about marketing? The fourth question is, what is your recommendation for people who are investing in this in the current climate? And then the fifth question, you have to line up another couple of victims for this process.
All sounds great.
Excellent, cool. All right, so let's start at the beginning. I'm interested to know, how are you qualified to talk to us about marketing?
Now, I don't mean to be the rebel, okay, but how is anybody qualified to talk about marketing? Marketing is everything. If you're a human being having a human experience and you've got an opinion on marketing, probably, whether you're at the receiving end or whether you're a business owner who's had to get out there and manage the perception of their brand, find ways of engaging with an audience. So. Yeah, I could trot out that I wrote a book on influence, which was a bestseller. I could trot out that I've been running my own businesses for 30 years and all of that. But I think that type of question is a broader question, which is, if you've been a consumer or if you've run a business and you've got you've had to take that brand to market, then you're qualified at least to have the conversation. Whether you're qualified to receive people's money in order to manage strategy and all of those kind of things is a different question. But we're all qualified to talk about marketing because we've all experienced it at one end and have, if you've run your own business, then you've had to at least give it consideration at the other. Because my personal belief is everything is marketing.
Okay, good. You are a rebel. You're the first person who said that. But I think that as well. I think everything is... Like, I used to do a sales presentation. I'm in the mood for selling, it was called. And at the end, they had to dance to ABBA's I'm in the mood for dancing. But the point I was made whenever I spoke to people about sales, or whenever people were resisting being salespeople, was you're selling all the time. If you are convincing people or motivating them to do things for you, or, if you're engaging with the world, you're effectively selling, I think. So that's interesting. That's a great answer.
That's not even something which is reserved for adults, right? As a kid, there were persuasion techniques because you want that extra biscuit, or you want a sweet, or you want to go to the park, right? Where they're learning how to position a concept in order to get to influence somebody to move from A to B, right?
Yes.
I want you to be bothered to get off the couch, Dad, in order to take me to the park. So what do I have to do in order to achieve that goal, right? So we're all selling all the time. We're all marketing all the time. And it's actually ridiculous to think it any other way. And I've seen some of your previous interviews, by the way, and as we know, Barnaby and Robert are good friends of mine too. But it seems we're quite aligned philosophically around the fact that there are very blurred lines between sales and marketing today. As I say, I think we've all been conditioned from very young ages, and some of us very naturally put our best foot forward and, understand the environment. I mean, if I just look at my niece and nephew, actually, my nephew is an introvert and doesn't necessarily speak up. My niece is a sales genius at like 3 years old. She knows how to manipulate and to position and to get what she wants. This is not even necessarily learned behaviour. This is natural and instinctive. It's the art of getting what you want ultimately.
Okay, that's cool. I've got an issue with this currently. You brought up philosophy, so can we be a little bit philosophical for like 5 minutes?
I'll try and keep up with you.
Okay. So for fun, what I like to do is surf photography. So I spend an inordinate amount of my time in the water, swimming like a mother, trying not to drown, in front of quite big waves taking photos of surfers. So that's what I like to do for fun. So this is the thing I do in my life for fun. The other people are there for fun. They're on the waves. They're having fun. I'm getting smashed up by the waves. I'm taking photos. I'm having fun. But what happens is these surfers would like me to give them these photographs. And that's okay, because I spend an inordinate amount of my time in the water getting smashed up taking these photographs. You can only imagine how much time I actually spend sorting these photographs and editing these photographs and making them beautiful. So actually, I don't feel compelled to give these people my photographs, is what I want to say. And I don't know if it's a generational thing, but I kind of feel like if they were more... this is what I actually feel like, is if they were more invested in me, then I would feel compelled to do it for them. Do you know what I mean? But because... and I just wonder, like, without sounding like an old fogey... Using the words old fogey, how can I not sound like an old fogey?
We've already established we're both, approaching the wrong side of 50 anyway, so...
Yes, well, one of us has passed the wrong side of 50. So the point is there a generational thing gone on where these people just haven't done what we're talking about, where they've learnt to get what they want or need from people?
I would push back a little on what you said, because actually, regardless of it being your hobby, right, you're still looking for some sort of exchange, some sort of reciprocation, right? You're putting time and effort into something which you enjoy, and for you it's about creating beautiful action, capturing a moment, creating beautiful action-orientated photographs. And the reason they want a copy of it is because it's them looking good in it, and they'd love to have that. Without the appreciation for how much work goes into the edit, the touch up, the print, etc.
They're not drowning.
But listen, like with any of these types of things, whether it be hobby or whether it be a business focused thing, right? There's an objective at the start of it. Yours is to create beautiful things. It's seemingly just for you. I don't know whether there's ego involved and you want your pictures seen by a wider audience. And of course, the way to achieve that is to give it to the surfers who've probably got some sort of social following and amplify your name on the photo in some way, shape or form. And therefore, there's something in it for you. So what you can do is create a reciprocation that serves you, that suits you. It's just how you look at any kind of situation. It's funny, from a speaking point of view, we get asked for freebies all the time. And in the UK, certainly amongst the kind of professional speaker circuit, there's a phrase that's used, which is fit, fee or flee. So you either do it for a fee, and which is obvious, you're there in service of the client, or you do it for some sort of fit. And the fit is a reciprocation. It might be that the audience is your perfect audience for your, the business services that you sell. It could be a charity, so something you're doing because of a kind of philanthropic need or urge. It could be a favour for a mate, whatever. There's some sort of fit. It could be just that you want showreel footage and it's been videoed, or there's a decent photographer there and you want the stage shots, whatever. There's something in it for you. And the flee is, if there's no fee and there's no fit, then you say no thank you and you politely decline the opportunity. But it seems to me here you're just looking for your fit. You're looking for the reciprocation. And, what do you want out of it?
Yes. Okay, well, you've nailed it completely. You've nailed it. Except one thing, which, the thing you've nailed is I just want to make beautiful photos. So actually, I have friends that I go with because they are good surfers and they look good on the wave and they get on the better looking waves and they do better stuff. But I think their frustration with me is that if it's more aesthetically beautiful than it is technically good them on the wave, then I'm always much more excited about it because I want to make beautiful things, 100%. But there are probably several kinds of surfers, but there are two kinds of surfers that I'm dealing with. People who know what they're doing and look good on a wave, and everybody else. And so that everybody else is an issue because they are imagining that they look like Mighty Mouse on this wave, but the truth is they pretty much often look like a scarecrow falling over. So it's not doing my goal, which is making a beautiful thing, and it's not even doing theirs, which is looking good on a wave. So this is an issue. But you're right, I am looking for some fit. I would like to find a broader audience. I would like maybe for people to invite me to take photos professionally and fly me around the world doing that. That would be awesome. So if they were liking and commenting and sharing my pictures and doing all those things, then I would feel 100% compelled to give them these photos. But they're not doing that. So make it
conditional.
So they haven't...
Make it conditional.
Sorry?
Make it conditional. So like any marketing strategy, well, you'd start with an objective in mind, or multiple objectives in mind, and you build the strategy stroke campaign from the back of that. So I work with a model around deep influence, and it's the title of my next book, and it's something I'm working on at the moment. But it starts with objectives. You then look at the kind of relationship with the person you're looking to influence and to have that with, and then you really apply the context. What's in it for them? What's important to them? What do they want to get out of it? What's important to you? You know, coming back to the relationship, and you build the content and the strategy around those objectives. So if what you're looking for is amplification, you know, get your name known, make it conditional. So we do something called a fireside chat every 2 weeks. We have
Okay, wait. So you've gone from counselling me on
well, I was going to give you an example on
the
the conditional campaigns. That's basically what I was going to give you.
Okay, cool. But you already rebelled on question number one. You can't just run away with this whole process.
One of my mantras in life is rules are for the guidance of the wise and the obedience of fools. So I'll always try and get outside of the framework if I can.
Okay, cool. Well, good luck today.
Challenge accepted, sir.
Okay, good. So you had an example.
Well, so
for us.
the example from a campaign point of view, we do something called a fireside chat every couple of weeks, and it's basically a cross between a TED talk and a Clubhouse, but on video, right? So we have somebody come and give a 10-minute insight to an idea that they have. It doesn't have to. It's more micro the better. And what follows is a 15-minute discussion which we facilitate on Zoom, and so the external speakers that we bring in to share the 10-minute insight, we build a whole campaign around it. We take an article, we amplify that to thousands of people. We have an Insta, Twitter, visual campaign that follows it, etc., etc. But the conditional thing is that they show up with some good content. They write a good article to be used as part of that amplification, but they promote it to their database. So what they get seen as is the kind of expert in their field, and they have the spotlight on them, and we make them feel and look important for the 2 weeks. And they are typically very impressive people anyway. But we get amplified too. So when people register for the fireside chat, everybody's database grows. Hopefully, it's a solid experience for everybody who comes, and therefore everybody's elevated, right? And all I'm saying is, if you've got objectives, because you've been thinking of it as a hobby rather than as something which serves a need for you too, just start to think a little bit more marketing strategy with it and figure out your objectives, what you want to do, and make that conditional. So I'm happy to give you this photo that makes you look amazing, but it must carry my name. I retain the copyright, and it must carry my name on the bottom so people can find me and look at my other pictures. And I'd love it if you amplified it through your social channels, etc., etc. So at least there's something in return there.
Well, but I was quite happy being bitter and imagining that millennials just hadn't learnt how to influence people. Can I not carry on with that?
So interestingly, it's a very I've got to be really careful what I say, because I firmly believe millennials are teaching us right now whole loads of new ways of doing stuff, right? But there is a sense of entitlement. There is a sense of this has come. So we've had all of these tools. We've not had to fight and learn and do all of the other stuff that people like you and I have had to do, right? We're the nomads. They're born into this stuff, right? And so sometimes we have to be a little bit prescriptive. And that's true in marketing too, right? If you're creating campaigns where you're putting lead magnets in place, you're at least being prescriptive. Here's the process on how you get the goodies, and it's about managing expectations. I'm a firm believer in upfront contracts and managing expectations of people. This is what I'm looking to get from this relationship. And as long as you're happy, then great. And the thing is, the reason why they'll want to uphold their end of the bargain is because they'll like your shots so much, and they'll want them the next time they go surfing too. So actually, if they don't fulfil their end of the bargain, you just won't do it again.
Yes. Good, thank you. I'm feeling resolved. And the thing is that this is my most quality time. Do you know what I mean? So this isn't like this isn't like this time where it's kind of work, or this isn't where I'm working for a client or I'm standing up in front of a group. That time is packaged and priced, and that's the value of that time. And all of that work that I do is about being in front of waves, looking at surfers. So I have that quality. So this must be worth 10 times any one of those minutes or seconds that I'm getting paid for. Do you know what I mean?
Martin, I'm totally envious, right? Because my downtime is playing guitar and playing golf, and I'm hopeless at both of them, right? Really crap at both of them. Nobody wants to pay to see that shit. Nobody wants to reciprocate anything with me, right? So the fact that you've got a hobby in demand... In fact, I've got an ex-business partner who's gone the photography route as a hobby. But he goes to Premiership football matches and rugby matches and does pitch-side photography, and has actually managed to make his hobby a paid-for thing. You know, he'll get the occasional front page of a newspaper, which funds his hobby for several months. So, you know, he's managed to do what he enjoys doing, action shots in a different context, but he's managed to make it pay for itself.
Okay, good. You fixed me. I feel completely counselled now. That's
my
brilliant.
work here is done.
So I think almost. We've still got another three and a half questions. So good. So I think you're the first person then who has demonstrated how you are qualified to talk to us about marketing. You obviously understand this subject deeply.
Well, I say it's all subjective, right? So this isn't just false modesty, by the way. Right? I didn't do a formal marketing qualification. I spent a decade and a half, 2 decades. My qualifications were in technology, really. And I spent a decade and a half speaking on stages, and my gentle introduction to marketing was much more about how we influence people. So, you know, the networking scene exploded early 2000 in the UK, even though it was a bit more established in the US for a bit longer. And it was that how do we motivate somebody to take you seriously in a face-to-face context? And then the kind of psychology behind persuasion became something much, much bigger for me as a subject. And before you knew it, that's where I was studying, that's where I was developing content, and that's where I focused my attention. And so my book didn't come out till 2016, but I wasn't even seeking to write a book. I was approached by a couple of publishers. And the first question I asked myself was, what qualifies me to do this? So when asked that question, we have to do that kind of self-validation too. And the conclusion I came to is that there's a couple of really good books on the topic, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie and The Psychology of Persuasion by Cialdini, right? And both of those books were written in the 1930s and the 1980s prior to the internet. And so all of those brilliant, proved, tried and tested methods of influence hadn't been contextualized for a digital age at all. And so when I agreed, it was because I thought, okay, I can do something with this. I can take established learning and I can just give it, let it be seen through a modern lens. And of course, the book was written in 2016, 2017, it was released. And the world has already moved on so far since, and so even people who I see as, established marketeers have some of them have got stuck in the practices of 5 years ago, and now they're out of date already, right? So if you haven't been continuously looking at how the world is changing and understanding how to apply old systems to a new context, then you're falling behind too. So I think for me right now, people who are qualified to talk about marketing, or at least are appropriate to be taking people's money for marketing services, are the people who are always thinking future.
Wow. Good. Okay, it's like me. My situation is I've just told you prior to us recording, my situation is that I kind of went on the run in 2014. So I am in the unenviable position of having burnt, I think, destroyed, finished, completely over, 3 perfectly, or 2.5 perfectly serviceable audiences. So when I was running the Effective Marketing Company, we were doing all of this stuff all day, every day. We took it seriously. MO was essentially to produce the kind of marketing that people would want. So literally people would come to us and say, we want marketing like yours. So we were all over this stuff. And then in 2014, when I decided to go and have adventures, and then in 2014, I produced a video called Killer LinkedIn Profile. It's now had 600,000 views. Now, whilst it was getting those 600,000 views, I was off having adventures. So all of that audience is also of no use to me whatsoever. But I arrived in New Zealand and I built like a website, a New Zealand travel review website, and I made lots of videos and then I built an audience for that. And then I wasn't in New Zealand from 2015 onwards, so I didn't do that either. And now where I am is I've burnt those 3 really good opportunities, and I really don't now in 2021 understand how to get that back, because it has moved since 2014.
So do you still have the relationships?
We're talking about social media audiences.
Right, okay.
So we're talking about, so I've still got 60,000 followers on Twitter, but, I've tested it a little bit and there's no engagement there, okay. So the New Zealand audience was on, that did really well, and maybe I could bring that back to life if I had a relevance for it. You see, now I'm on this YouTube mission again, so I'm doing well with the content, and I really need to work out how to do YouTube well, so that all this great content gets to the number of people, or the amount of people that I would like to see benefit from it.
So this is part this kind of very adaptive society we're living in, particularly under the lens of the last couple of years, fascinate me, right? Because the change that's taking place right now, I think, was inevitable. I just think it's accelerated because of a pandemic and all the other kind of things that we particularly here, Brexit and everything else that's going on. We've all had to adapt quicker than the change was perhaps expected, right? And what I find quite fascinating is, as a speaker, my work was travelling, keynoting at events and doing stuff. However, pandemic hit, all gigs were cancelled. Okay, and then the world started to think, okay, well, we still need to engage with our audiences, even if we're not bringing them together face to face. And so then the kind of virtual landscape took place. Now, I know you've got a future guest coming on called Warren Knight, who's a business partner of mine, and a bloody good buddy too. You'll enjoy him. But with Warren, we met just before lockdown happened, and the first lockdown happened in the UK, and he was fascinated with the work I'd been doing the year prior, which was masterminding other speakers. I was bringing thought leaders together who were wanting to build a better personal brand, get out there and win kind of commercial opportunities off the back of their knowledge. And so we looked at what he was doing in the kind of digital marketing space and digital transformation space, and the stuff that I was doing, which was much more around psychology of influence and people. And we thought, okay, let's combine forces. And our idea back then was to create an environment in 5-star hotel rooms, bringing people together for, really kind of intimate masterminding once a month. And of course, lockdown happened, and that stopped too, that idea. But we adapted, right? And we ended up working with, last year, over 150 different businesses in 14 different countries. And I don't just mean a light touch. We spent proper intimate time with these businesses, helping them create their personal brands or create their business brands, really nail their value propositions, get their positioning right on all environments, think about strategies for partnership and building methodology stroke models so they've got clarity and explanatory power around what they do, and then even through that kind of that sales customer acquisition journey, that nurturing phase, we worked with them on all of those things, right, over 15 months. And all I'm saying to you is that in the type of work that we do, because everybody's adapted to virtual, it's not as if I don't think there's a single consultative business that now cannot be done through a camera. Your work can be done from Bali just like anybody else. If you've got an audience, then design something which serves them just virtually. And in fact, for many people now, it's the preference. A really good buddy of mine is a very highly regarded IFA. And so similar thing, right? His job was going into the houses of high net worths in order to manage portfolio and to give them investment strategies. And the world changed, so everything was done via Zoom. In a recent poll, I just had a conversation with him recently. In a recent poll of his customer base, only 2 out of the whole portfolio want face-to-face meetings moving forward. The rest of them all want virtual. So his whole business has changed from driving to lots of different parts of the country and spending a lot of dead time in the car to just switching on to Zoom. And in fact, the meetings go better because they're short, sharp and sweet. But if there were several family members involved in the content, they're all sat around the screen looking at the figures. So it's rather than across a living room at different parts where they can't see the numbers, it's more attuned to actually being focused and getting an outcome quicker. So all I'm saying is that industry, particularly consultative industries, they can adapt. It's absolutely possible. And if you've got an audience in two different countries, you can still serve them. Your content, your YouTube channel, if you're commercialise it, might be one thing, but you can still serve them with and design the kind of service that gives them value and in return gets you paid.
100%, yeah, and that's kind of what is going on. And this process kind of started also as part of the lockdown and the pandemic thing, I suppose. So the question is, so we've got, you rebel, you didn't let me ask the second question, you've just started answering it. So we've got to the point where the question should be, who are your customers, how do you win your customers, and what is it that you do that delivers value from your customers? But you're kind of giving us a sense of that already.
Sorry.
So I'm just wondering if there's any part of that question that you didn't answer already. So your customers are in how many different countries?
So right now we have about 150 people we've been working with in about 14 different countries.
40. 1-4. Okay.
Mind you, that's just gone up
right.
Because we've just got a gig in Ghana, which is running an accelerator for a telecoms company in Ghana, and actually doing a lot of work in places like Saudi now in the Middle East through basically Warren's brilliance. Actually, we're developing a whole client base in the Middle East at the moment, which is really cool.
Okay, good. Right. So, how did you do that then? That's interesting. That's useful.
So what the broader 14 countries? It's marketing 101, right? It's have some form of value add content that engages people. Whether that was, we started actually doing webinars. Webinars were brilliant at the start of lockdown because if everybody was confined, what they were looking for was some sort of human interaction, and typically they had strategies for a bit of personal and professional development. So we got involved with getting people on very interactive webinars, which then moved them to. So our product staircase it started with that, but we then took them to a one-day workshop, which was all focused on identity. So anybody that's starting a business, we helped them to understand where their values were, where their purpose was, what their objectives were for their business. So they really got clarity, and then you build the brand around that. You think about the marketplace you serve and how to construct a value proposition that serves that marketplace. And there's actually we use things like Ikigai, just to have quite philosophical conversations at that stage, so people get a sense of where it is they want to go. When you've got that, you can start putting a strategy in place. Until you've got that sense of priority and objective, it's really hard to give people strategy. So we started doing those workshops as a result of the webinars, and then the next step was we had an 8-week accelerator that we worked with people on, and that was really transformational, for many people. And then beyond that, we run a community which people stay in every single month. They do masterminding, there are masterclasses, and a whole load of things that we do with them, one-to-one coaching. So working with a whole load of different businesses from lots and lots of different sectors, and helping them get a better sense of where they're going, but then put the strategy in place to get there. That was essentially what we did.
Okay, fantastic. And how did you get them on the webinar in the first place?
A mixture of creating content that's shareable, that adds value, asking for the shares and the likes. Using our own databases, using our own social followings, like you, Warren, and I have got pretty decent following across several different platforms. And sometimes you have to re-engage and waken those people up again, right? As you've just said, you've got one list that's slightly more engaged than the other. What can you do to reawaken and add value to those people? And it's slowly but surely it picked up. Even with the Fireside Chat, which is one of our latest things, we've done maybe 8 or 9 of them, and we only do it every 2 weeks. And actually, it's more of a facilitation exercise than it is for kind of prepared remarks. Even though we do the campaign creation thing, it doesn't actually take that long. But every single week, or every single time we do it, we have even more people register and even more people attend. So it's just growing and growing and growing. And the idea is that what's good for us is that we show that we're shining the light on other people. It's kind of like what you're doing, bringing people onto this format and having a conversation is absolutely shining the spotlight on other people. There's one of the principles I talk about in my book is the principle of credibility by association. So 2 reasonably intelligent guys having a reasonably intelligent conversation in this context, actually we both come off better for it, and we're both demonstrating values actually by the conversation that we're having. You express something where you wanted to be appreciated for your work. I wanted to help. There's values at play in every conversation you ever have with people, and people are either drawn to that or they're not. And typically those people who go out with vanilla marketing campaigns trying to capture everybody are the ones who typically are the least successful. Some of the best marketeers I know are completely polarizing, and they don't care. They're being authentically themselves and working to their values, and they only want to work with the people who get them and understand them. And I kind of respect that more. In my past, I confess, I've been too vanilla. I've been trying to please everybody rather than actually just focus on attracting people who get me, like me, want to work with me, and think that this would be the right style to work with.
Okay, wow. Right, so I'm thinking lots of things. I mean, my situation is I'm doing something quite different. Like previously, I wanted people to like me and my company and want to work with us. And, we were full-time on that. Now what I'm looking to do is I just want to share what I've got, and as much as I can get from other people like yourself. That's kind of my mission. And I kind of feel like, because of my conspiratorial outlook, if I can get Google to pay for that through YouTube, that would be like perfect poetic justice. So I'm doing something different, I think, and it's okay. I'm thinking, there's 2 things I'm really intrigued about. Like the first is there's this thing, I don't know if it's particular to digital marketing, but digital marketing seems to concentrate the feeling of, like you said at the beginning, this fear of missing out thing. Like I'm telling you, I've burnt these audiences, when actually if I were my client, I'd be telling myself to buck up and engage those audiences. Do you know what I mean? They're all still there probably, or some of them are still there. I'm starting with something. But I feel like if I'd carried on with the videos in 2014, I could have been Casey Neistat, but I didn't, so I missed out. So so that's something that I'm really interested to get your perspective on. And then the other thing is, like for me, Cialdini's influence is the Bible when it comes to marketing. Like if you're in sales and marketing and you haven't read that book, then you're just not doing. You can't be doing it right, So I'm interested to know how you have evolved to that. So I'm interested in those 2 things. The first one is probably much less interesting. Or maybe they're both the same
first
thing.
one was an extension of the values conversation, really. But, people like you, myself, Barnaby with bigger brands typically, Robert Craven very specifically with digital agencies, whether they've identified a niche audience or whether they're, generalists. Like Barnaby is a self-confessed generalist. He's worked pretty much in every industry at a very high level. Really, really good brands, right? These are still my go-to people when I need feedback and insight, right? So, often the role that we do in our work with businesses is a facilitation role, right? We don't come professing to have all of the answers, but what we ask is great questions in order to get further clarity on what it is the client actually wants to achieve from their business. what it is they actually do for their marketplace, whether their marketplace is prepared to pay for that, of course, and then building the strategies in order to try and get that into their hands. I mean, it's pretty conceptually easy, an easy thing to get your head around, and actually. We have to. You come across as a really humble guy, Martin, right? So I'm sure you're awesome at what you do because you're approachable, right? You can have these kind of conversations where people feel at ease with you and tell you the stuff that you need to know in order to help them. It's much easier to do that looking at somebody else's position than it is to look at your own sometimes, right? And that's also because we all internalize things, and therefore we're running them through our filters and our conditioning and our biases and all of those things, which stops us necessarily from seeing things clearly. So it's that third-party perspective, that objective perspective, which helps. So I don't know if that answered question one, but the way I see it is, we all need that kind of facilitator to help us take whatever the idea is, make it a really clear vision, and therefore put the strategies in place to achieve that. That's essentially what we do. The second thing around books like Cialdini, I mean, I've got behind here. I've got a bookcase full of marketeers, business gurus. I'm a big fan of Seth Godin. He's probably my go-to person. But really, what they share is old knowledge. Many of the philosophies that exist today, you can still find some resemblance of them from Aristotle or Confucius or whatever. Right? It's always old ideas reimagined and recontextualized for the age that we live in. This is old knowledge applied today. And my point to you around those books, the Psychology of Persuasion was written in the 1980s, right? Now, whilst the principles are absolutely intact still today, right? There's still a context to how we deliver something. It's still, if you look at any good communication has an element of feedback at the end, which enables marketeers to recalibrate and refine the message or make the kind of acquisition journey easier or whatever it is. That feedback loop is really important. But as technology changes, so does the method of feedback. And so we always need to be evolving our thinking to be contextual for the age that we live in. And that was my point from it, right? It's one of many good marketing books that I read. It just has to be applied through the context of yourself, the context of the audience that you serve, and the kind of technology available to you today in order to properly leverage it.
Okay, 100%. So I would say I teach digital marketing. So that's what I do, is I teach digital marketing. That's how I make my money now. And the reason we do digital marketing is because of the amazing feedback. So, prior to digital marketing, we might have sent a direct mail piece. We might have put something up on a billboard. We might have stuffed things through people's letterboxes. We might have been telemarketing, cold calling people. The issue with what went on before, we might have been advertising on the television or on radio, or the issue with all of that is that you are kind of throwing stuff into the ether without any real sense of what the impact of that might be. Like John Wanamaker said, I know 50% of my advertising is effective. I just don't know which 50%. Well, with digital media, we are supposed to know, and I know there are some challenges coming up with this now, but we are supposed to know. What difference has that made? Has that made the difference that it should have made?
Which bit, sorry? The ability to analyse and track, and has that made a difference?
The transparency, the feedback. The fact that we know if we put out a direct mail campaign, then the Direct Mail Institute will tell us that maybe 0.1% will get opened. Whereas if we put out an email campaign, we can see exactly what percentage opened it, how long they had it open, what they clicked on, then onto the website, how long they spent on the website, all of this stuff. So the question I'm asking you is because you told me that how to win friends and influence people was in the 30s.
Psychology of Persuasion, 80s. Yeah.
Psychology of Persuasion was in the 80s. So that is now 90 years old and 40 years old. But so how much has digital marketing changed?
It massively has, and you've just expressed one of the points beautifully, which is the kind of analytics. The feedback mechanism is so much more sophisticated now. If you think back to both of the two books referenced, they're really about face-to-face conversations and persuasion techniques, right? Which I think is actually quite superficial. It's quite surface level, right? And the difference between whether you need a surface level engagement in order to buy some sort of commoditized low price product, or whether you need actually a deeper resonance with people in order to go on a much more profound journey with you, right? So the work that we do requires a much deeper convictions, a much deeper sense of confidence or certainty in order to take that next step with us. Right? They need to be sure. And it's funny. I heard a speaker called James Ashford in the UK, he's the founder of Go Proposal, which is the kind of instant proposal. He does this specifically for the accounting marketplace, but he's very good marketeer, very good creator. In fact, would be somebody I'd recommend for your podcast, even though it's niche focused. He's very, very good. And he as a throwaway comment talked about this kind of quest for certainty in the buying process, and didn't think any more of it. But honestly, it sent me spiraling for about 3 days. I was thinking about what are the building blocks of certainty? What constitutes certainty in the mind's eye of your target marketplace? And I came up with lots and lots of building blocks for certainty. There's sometimes it might be the credibility by association. Who do they hang out with? Let's have a look at the content. How do they demonstrate their expertise? That might be one of the aspects. Let's do our due diligence. What are people saying about them? Where's the testimonials? Where are the case studies? What's their reviews on Google? Just as one aspect of it. Where's the social proof? And certainty looks different for different types of businesses, and there are different levels required depending on what the purchase is. But even if I go and buy a £5 product on Amazon now, I'm still reading the reviews and seeking out the ones which are 4 or 5 star and above. Now, there's a deeper level of certainty I need for anything that A, costs more, but B, if there needs to be some sort of chemistry match with the person I'm going to go and work with. So this quest for certainty is really important today, because I believe we have younger demographics coming through who actually crave more meaning. They actually crave a kind of deeper resonance for most of the people they serve. Even coming back to the investment circles that I referenced earlier on with my friend, there's a real trend amongst younger people who are only investing in opportunities which have at least some sort of conscious capitalism at their core, right? They want to make ethical investments, not just wear the normal capitalist hat and go for maximum profit. It's not how they're wired. And I actually believe, whilst that's that charge I think is being led by younger generations, actually we're all catching up. So nowadays people are looking for a little bit more meaning in the things that they do, and I think that has to be translated into marketing. If you're a brand today that's not articulating your values and articulating the kind of broader societal impact that you have, then you're missing a trick, and you're probably going to get left behind by those that are, because that's what wins hearts and minds. It's not just superficial persuasion, it's a deeper resonance, it's deep influence, which is the title of my next book.
Good. I'm going to read both of your books.
Drop me your address, my friend, and I'll pop you one in the post.
Okay, I'm in Indonesia.
No, I don't care. I post internationally anyway for my members, so it's fine.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, cool. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, good. I've got an issue with this, Warren. I've really got an issue with this. I'm kind of conflicted. I think lots of people, marketing people especially, are talking about this stuff, this purpose, this meaning, this ethics. I think they are. But I wonder how, when it actually comes down to it, how much people really do care. And this came up in one of these conversations I had recently. So, for example, I'm an Apple user, and we know that the part of the I don't use them for my phone, for example. So when I don't have to use them, I don't use them. But my computer will always be an Apple computer. But we know about the conditions that people who are producing these computers are working under. But it doesn't stop the iPhone being the most popular brand of phone in the world. And I don't know if that's particular. I stopped using an iPhone because somebody once told me it was a mum's phone. So that was enough to convince me I didn't want it anymore. It's like everyone's mum's got an iPhone. So here's the challenging question. Is this purpose, ethics, all of this stuff, is this just marketing fluff? Or are people genuinely, deeply interested in these issues? And sorry, just to make it more complicated, maybe not, I don't know. Like when I was a kid, like I knew I wouldn't grow up to work in the weapons industry, and nobody I knew that had morals would do that. Do you know what I mean? But it seems to me now that almost whichever industry you look at, they're not behaving in a particularly ethical or responsible way. So my question is, surface level, and marketers are very interested in this idea of values and purpose and ethics. And underneath that is just a sea of desperation. It's a horrible mess if you spend too long looking at the news. So is that a surface level thing, or is there and how would we know?
So I share your cynical nature, sir.
Good.
However,
thank you.
There's no denying we are hugely emotional creatures, right? And so when a charity video posts the beneficiary of the charity, both in their plight and in the kind of transformation aspect after they've received the funding, they are pulling on heartstrings, right? So the reason why Barnaby is very, very good, for example, he's worked with a number of charities, and he absolutely transformed monies received because he knew how to tell the story. He knew how to be a storyteller for that charity, and to build campaigns around that storytelling, right? And sure enough, he more than paid for himself as a marketeer because they raised far more funding and had a much more polished brand at the end of it. That's an example that when you tell stories and you demonstrate values, you win hearts and minds. To come back to your Apple point, I think most people are completely ignorant of those working conditions. I personally don't know what the actual detail is. I would have thought they would have sorted it out by now, and it was probably something of the past. But I would equally cynically believe that every other technology brand was working with the same practices. Doesn't make it right, but if I was an activist, I would be doing more. If it was something that really was really important to me, I'd be an activist and I'd be doing more to change that, right? But I bet you one thing. If Apple had a competitor which was the same ergonomics, the same intuitive kind of design and user interface, but highly ethical, I guarantee you they would be market dominant because people would always make that choice. I believe they would always make that choice. So whatever the kind of criteria comes, if you believe in a cause, if you believe that something is serving the greater good and not just out and out profit making machine, I believe you'll make that decision. And the same is true because it's about the relationship you have, right, with the brands that you deal with. Again, talking about millennials earlier on, millennials are much more fickle, less brand loyal. If the brands that they use day in, day out disappear tomorrow, they will just go and find a replacement. No problem at all. But they'll do that based on social proof, recommendation, and what's being talked about, right? And certainly something that appeals to hearts and minds will win over something that's just transactional, I believe.
Okay, good. And I mean, I really hope so as well. I really hope so. But I think what you're saying is absolutely true, is that they are all as bad as each other. And the truth is you can't produce a mobile phone without using resources, minerals that are reportedly I mean, God, this got depressing.
Well. Actually, it won't be the exploitation of people. It'll be to the detriment of people because it'll be robots doing it. Moving forward, and I'm sure they are already a dominant part of any production line.
Yes.
But that's where it's going, right? And
yeah.
What I also believe is that for lots and lots of places, they would still rather have the injection of revenue and employment of people rather than them just starving without jobs, right? The key is how do we upskill and actually improve the lives of everybody in the kind of distribution chain or production chain. How do we do that as a brand? And if you're demonstrating those values and putting initiatives in place beyond just getting your stuff made cheaply, then I think you'll still win hearts and minds. People will see you're striving for better. Just a personal opinion, but I am also as cynical as you, so I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, and even when you talk about Barnaby doing the work for these charities, the outcome was that they had much more compelling stories, a much more compelling brand, a much more polished brand, and better revenues. It just hurts me a little bit. that shouldn't be the objective of a charity. If we said so many more children fed, or so many more people housed, or I don't know. I do worry about that.
It means to an end. There are so many different charitable causes now. Where do you spend your time and where do you give? Well, if you're competing for people's support, know that they've got hundreds of other things they could be supporting. So how do you make something important to somebody? You tell them stories. You activate them a little bit around that cause, and then they become a supporter because of it's all about the outcome. It's all about the people it would serve in the charity space, but you've still got to activate them to give a shit about the cause in the first place, right?
Yes. And giving a shit, I think, is really important. Like, we'll end this now, but I just want to make one point. I just always really amused me. I'm going to make 2 points because I'm going to bring up game shows. So I think, firstly, this isn't at all relevant, so we'll get this out of the way. I think peace in the Middle East could be achieved if they had game shows that included all of the people from all of the different factions. So I think, for example, when you're watching a game show and you're thinking, like the guy standing there, you're thinking, oh, he's a bit of a dick. But then he says, oh, this is my name, this is who I'm from, and this is something else about me. All of a sudden, you really care about that person. You understand they're a person. So that's my resolution for the Middle East, the conflict in the Middle East, is have game shows with everyone on them that they all watch, so they all start to see it's a humanizing effect. That was the first thing that was completely not relevant. The second thing about game shows, family fortunes, celebrity family fortunes, where you've got, I don't know, this family from Coronation Street and this family from EastEnders, and basically the family from Coronation Street are in favour of the Donkey Sanctuary, so if they win, the Donkey Sanctuary gets the money, and the people from the other one, EastEnders, care about cats, stray cats or something, and then they go all the way through this process, half an hour, and then the stray cats get the money. No one gives a shit about the donkeys anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and what effect does that have on us as a society where, and I mean, this I'm giving you the completely fabricated family fortune story, but it feels like we're in, like, because we're so, like, all of these stories are so compounded and they're landing on us all day, every day. Like, actually, 100% what you're saying is right. Our mission as marketers, certainly at the level that you're operating and Barnaby's operating at, where you're talking about brands, is to make yourselves better, stand out and be better because of all of this noise. But all of the noise is just so confusing.
I won't say what came into my head when you were talking about those poor donkeys, but I would argue that awareness was raised in that scenario for both charities, and they would have probably had viewers, if they watch in their thousands, if not millions, clicking through and supporting. Even as a result of not necessarily winning. They might be a sympathy vote and, people will vote from that perspective. So the awareness of the charity was maybe one of the bigger objectives there. But I guarantee you both charities would have got something, right? In that scenario.
So. In that scenario. 10 grand.
But it's awareness, but it all comes down to the storytelling. They're telling the story, and celebrities like it because they seem to be doing something for a cause. It's all values driven stuff. They're still marketing. By appearing on a show like that, it's just marketing. That's all it is. It's a PR exercise.
Right. Robert says it's getting harder.
Which particular aspect? Let's be specific. What does Robert say is getting harder?
He says marketing is getting harder. Running a successful business is getting harder because there is the barrier to entry is so much lower, and there are so many more people in it. Whereas pre-digital marketing, pre-social media, the barrier to entry was higher if you wanted to run a business.
So I agree and I disagree with Mr. Craven. I agree it's become more complex, and by the very nature, if something's more complex, it's potentially harder. However, I don't think we've ever had as many channels and as many opportunities to analyse whether something lands or misses in marketing ever, and it will only even get more complex, but even more data and more information at our disposal. I think what's happened is the consumer has become a lot more sophisticated. Not only around what's going on in the process, the process of marketing and how they're served information, and there's a sense of whether you're being manipulated, but actually the consumer wants to know the backstory. They want to know the values. They want to know what they stand for before they invest their time, effort, and money. So I think there's a level of sophistication from the consumer. I think there's a complexity, particularly with the technology, but that gives us a lot more analytics for better feedback. Therefore we can recalibrate and tweak our message. But the one thing that I think has made it harder, and the bit I agree with Mr. Craven, is the fact that people have also become quite cynical, and actually we are bombarded with so many messages today. We're all suffering from attention deficits, and therefore we're automatically filtering now. It was just too much information, so we're having to filter in order to focus. So it's much harder to get through. I mean, if anybody who receives a ton of email marketing knows they probably never read the email. You can see what's a HTML email coming through, and the chances are you're deleting it out of your inbox and not reading it in detail. So the only way you get your email marketing read today is by having already built the relationship with the target of that email marketing.
Nice to see you again, Warren. Are we going to pretend that the technology didn't fall apart yesterday and we can come back 24 hours later to try and do this again?
I think we should confess, and then that way, if there's a lack of continuity of what I was saying when we left off to what we start to talk about now, then that's obvious, right?
Okay.
Sometimes shit goes south. Sometimes
it goes south, yeah. And sometimes dirty people are still wearing yesterday's shirt, whereas I've got 2 of these shirts, so...
So just to confess, right, I thought we were going to try and do the continuity thing, so I made sure I came in the same shirt again, just to be mindful of your audience, so they would have a seamless experience. But okay. We're going to be raw and authentic, right?
Let's try and be honest. Let's pretend we're not marketers for a second and just be completely honest and open.
Actually, now that's kind of an extension of what we were talking about yesterday, because I think the marketers who are getting the most success now are the ones that are actually managing to be that little bit more authentic in their communication, which probably leads us quite nicely on to the challenges you've been having with Riverside, doesn't it?
I think it does. So I think it does. I think it's weird, and I think it's kind of. I'm glad it fell apart yesterday because I was kind of running out of steam. I was challenging you. And I knew what I was trying to say, but I wasn't conveying it to you, so you weren't having the opportunity to answer that question. What I want to know is, what we were talking about is, the last question I asked you is about how Robert Craven thinks it's more difficult now, and you answered that, and we've got that full answer, so they will have heard that answer. But what I'm interested to know is this really what marketing are supposed to be doing? Is it really what marketing are supposed to be doing, to be taking a shit thing and trying to present it as a good thing? because I am hugely cynical, but I kind of have like an idealistic view of what an effective marketer does is understand a market, understand the needs of the market, produce a solution that meets those needs or desires, and then communicates the value that is available to that market. But I think, and that's what goes on, I think, at our level. You know, when we are dealing with our customers, that has to be what goes on. We don't have to make an investment in trying to look better than we are, because we stand up and we present ourselves. And people will make a judgment, this is a good person or a bad person, and they're representing a good business or a bad business. So those are kinds of the two things that I'm interested in, which are, you know, clearly big businesses have to engage in PR because they're typically not as nice as we would like them to be, and they have to try and convince us that they are. And secondly, do small businesses have to worry about that at all, especially when they're small businesses and they're new businesses and they have more pressing requirements, I would say, like not trying to suppress people who are having issues with your software, like the people at Riverside are. So this is kind of tied in. This is how I think about this thing. Is it not just enough to do a stand-up job and stand up if it doesn't quite meet the needs of your market and work with them until it does? That's kind of what I'm thinking now.
It's a lovely question, and I have a couple of different aspects to this as part of my answer, right? I think once upon a time, many, many years ago, if you were a marketer, then your job was to sensationalize whatever the product is, and it would sell. And if it was a bad product or a bad service, there was very little comeback on you because we didn't have the channels to amplify our grievances, like we do today, right? I think today you get found out very, very quickly if the product or service isn't right. And I think you hit a nail on the head in your literally your first sentence to that question, which was around. Yesterday you asked me what I thought marketing was, and I said I think marketing is everything, right? And so in a small business, it's every experience that a prospect or a customer has with you is essentially marketing. But a business is only successful if it has a value proposition which actually adds value, right? And if it doesn't do that, today you get found out very, very, very quickly. So you can dress something up as nicely as you want to with marketing fluff, but if the product or service doesn't do what it's built to do, you get found out. So it's about working on our value propositions as much as anything else today, and then telling our stories. But it starts with the value proposition. And I like the simple kind of value proposition canvas for that, right? Which is, and I think it's particularly appropriate in times of rapid change that we find ourselves in now, because the premise is that it starts by looking at your marketplace and looking at the pain that they're in, or looking at the potential gain that you can help them with, right? So looking at pains and gains, and that's an observation exercise. And then on the other side, it's about designing products and services that solve those problems, right? And then the marketing aspect is how we then tell everybody about it, and we raise awareness of the potential for gains or the solutions to pains, right? Now, when the marketplace changes on a regular basis, that observation has to happen frequently. You can't just rest on your laurels that once upon a time this was a product fit for task. Where technology is completely disrupting so many industries, we have to continuously be looking at our products and services and just making that judgment: is this still fit for task? Is this still fit for purpose? Or has the world moved on and we need to adapt? This is the reason why so many big household brands have fallen by the wayside in just the last 20 odd years. I mean, my favourite case study years ago when I was talking on stage was Yell. Yellow Pages started in 1956 in the UK in Brighton and Hove, right? And they were just a local directory which spread all across the UK, and then before you knew it, onto 4 continents where they owned search. So this little thing called the internet came along, and there was nobody saying, how is this going to disrupt our business? How can we own search in this new age? And of course they didn't react, and the rest is history with Google and Bing. But that's the reality. They failed to innovate, and everybody's had the same Kodak examples trotted out over the last God knows how many years. It's been written in a ton of books. People who invent technology and then don't actually go and capitalize on it and realize, that's how it's going to become mainstream. And the challenge for small business is we don't have the deep pockets for R&D. We don't have lots and lots of people to bounce ideas off in teams. And therefore, it's still quite important for us to find that sense of community that can be the sounding block, that can be the incubator for our ideas, can be the critical feedback on the issues that we face. And that's actually why Warren Knight and I founded HiveMind, because it was a community of people who could actually come and be that resource for each other and help develop those concepts and ideas. So, when you said yesterday, what gives me the authority to talk about marketing? My pushback on that was genuine. I don't necessarily consider myself a marketer. Marketing is something I've had to do. It's something that I enjoy doing. I all communication where you have to understand who the message is directed at and then give a contextual message for them. I'm fascinated by all of that stuff. Context is hugely important. But I don't necessarily consider myself a marketer. I consider myself somebody who also looks at the value proposition and the business as a whole, and how you actually go and really properly get deep influence with people, how you engage with people. And for me, that's beyond the traditional definition of what marketing was.
Okay, good. So let's take this case in point then. So these people, Riverside, this service that we're using again right now, have come up with a brilliant concept, because what was going on previously, and I mean especially in the last 18 months, was an abomination. It really was. When they are presenting Sky Sports on Zoom, and the image is a mess, and it sounds, Riverside's marketing is right. It sounds like, I can't remember exactly what they say, but they say basically it looks like a toilet and it sounds like a toilet, and that is entirely true. So 100% they found a real need in the market, and when I found this, I was hugely excited. Now, technologically, this is a brilliant thing, but it's not anywhere near perfect, and I'm having this issue with the syncing. We had an issue that it crashed yesterday. The real issue is that I am voicing this on their Facebook community, because that's where they send you once you're a customer, and they're deleting my posts. Now, I don't believe they're deleting my posts because they are evil. I believe that they are deleting my posts because they don't know how to cope with this situation. So I don't know how many users they've got. They've got some corporations on their front page who are supposedly their customers of theirs. I don't know what's going on, but this is almost the biggest danger for this type of company, is that you're just catapulted into the ether, and that's really difficult, because now, exactly like you say, we are marketers. We're really good at telling stories about how bad customer service is, and they're upsetting us, and we have the platforms to now go out and diss their business. So their business, the wheels could come off, not because they haven't got a good product, not because they haven't gotten it to market, but because actually it's too much of those things. It's too good and there's too much market for it. What do you think?
I think it's worse than that in this particular case.
Do you think
only
they're
had
evil?
I've only had 5 minutes to get upset about this, right? Because you only told me about this just before we came on the call, right? But they're clearly deleting the same post over and over again, because you posted it 3-4 times, and now they've got you on moderated comments, right?
Yes.
You weren't going on and calling them names and being overly derogatory. You were saying,
No.
there's a problem with the lip syncing. Can you help me with the problem?
Yes.
And just to reiterate the context, their site sends you to the Facebook group for customer support.
Yes.
So if you just think about the user journey there, they've sent you to a place for customer support. You ask a question for customer support, and they delete you 4 times.
Yes.
Because they don't want anybody to see anything negative about the platform, particularly the user community.
Yes.
Now, what that tells you is that your support query isn't important. That they're more concerned about the perception of their product than they are about the reality of it.
Yep.
It shows that they're not necessarily focused on fixing what's broken, and the more importantly to me, and the biggest sin, is they are motivating you to go and amplify your grievance somewhere else where they're not in control of the conversation,
Yes.
which is just stupidity.
Okay.
So, coming back to being in control of the kind of brand message or communication, the first thing, golden rule of customer experience, if somebody's got a problem, you acknowledge the problem, right? That diffuses them almost immediately.
Yes.
I mean, just to give you an example of this, there's a product called Review. I think it's Review Filter, but it's a hotel booking system, stroke review system for any kind of hotel. And the idea is that if you're a guest in a hotel and you come along and you have a great experience, they're the first ones to ask you whether you had a great experience. They send you an email. Did you enjoy your stay with us? Rate us out of 5. If you rate a 4 or a 5, it immediately flips to TripAdvisor and says, "Great that you've had a great experience. Wonder if you wouldn't mind just publishing that here." And you're auto logged in, so all you have to do is click publish, and your review is there as a 4 or 5. If the review is a 3 or less, what it does is it immediately responds and acknowledges the problem and says, "I'm sorry you've had a bad experience. We'll be in touch to see what went wrong and see how we can make it right." Which completely diffuses any motivation for somebody to go to TripAdvisor to complain, because they feel like they've been heard and that their issue's being addressed. So
Yes.
what that does is it helps a hotel work on their customer service and customer experience, because they're understanding what the issues are. That's a good thing, It also means that they're almost controlling the publicity and the press that goes out to the marketplace, which is clever.
Yes.
Right? But the integrity behind being interested in the problem so they can solve the problem is the bit that counts. Right? But to motivate marketeers who arguably know how to use these platforms to say, "Oh, I'm really pissed off with this because," and they're not in control of the message, for me is a massive cardinal sin.
It's a
And
massive
I'd be
cardinal
interested
sin,
in the
but-
context of the organisation, because whether they're based in a certain culture where pride and ego, different cultures have different levels of controlling perceptions, right?
Yes.
And whether that's the case in this example, I don't know, but somebody needs a good talking to.
Yes. Okay, so I've got the best example of this ever, I think. So between 1999 and 2005, late 2004, I was based in South Africa, and I was working in South Africa, and I had a lot of South African friends. And this was about the time that all the offshoring was going on, you remember? So all the banks were shipping their customer services out to India, and directory inquiries, or 118, or whatever it was at that time, that also now defunct search function, they decided to outsource their work to South Africa. So a few people that I knew went to work for these new organisations, answering the calls, not answering the calls, but managing teams of people who are answering calls from the UK for directory inquiries, or 118. And so I was interested in this because culturally, South Africa and the UK are quite different. So I said to them, what are they telling you about the culture? And my friend said to me, well, the one thing they have told us is that if an English person asks you for a number and you can't find the number, what you must do is apologise and tell them, look, but please, if you're looking for a number again in the future, remember 118, or directory inquiries, or whatever it was. Now, what I know culturally about South Africa, because I lived there for 5 years, I have never heard a South African apologise about anything. They don't apologise. And this is true of the South African culture. So if it's a black person or an Indian person, an English South African, or a Dutch or Afrikaans South African, I've never heard one of them apologise. So I said to my friend, but you don't apologise, so what do you do? And he said, oh, we just give them the wrong number. So that is how, and this was sometime between, this is probably 2003, 2004. So that goes to show you how, culturally you could just miss entirely. Like, the last thing you can ever do is give an English person bad service, because they will go ballistic, and they will be phoning up 10 times demanding to speak to a supervisor to find out why they've been given the wrong number. But the last thing you can expect a South African to do is apologise, because they just don't, culturally, they don't apologise, So it's interesting like that. And this is interesting because, for me, like the other thing that came up yesterday was, you and Warren put together this new business, and you went out and you did business in all these new countries, but it never and when I pressed you on it, you tell me, but it's because we had these databases in advance. So it never
that was
quite goes.
one of the aspects for sure.
One of the aspects, yeah. So a component of you and Warren putting this business together during this pandemic is the fact that you had been marketing yourselves for however many years you'd been marketing yourselves. And so what I'm really interested in is why people don't trust marketers, because they don't. Why small business people don't understand what marketing is and see the necessity for marketing. And are these things connected? And should I just get over it because, I've wanted to be the small business's marketing champion for nearly 20 years, and they clearly don't deserve one?
I think you touch on a larger societal problem today, and that is we live in an age of huge misinformation. And so I think it's making us all become a lot more cynical and feel the need to do a lot more due diligence than we ever did before. I mean, listen, I've been running my own businesses for quite a few years now, and on at least 2 occasions I've employed a private investigator before putting my neck on the line with a business deal, which I thought something's not quite right here, and I'm nervous. And on both of those 2 occasions, my instincts were correct, and it was a con artist or what have you, but said all the right things in all the right places. But my intuition served me in those particular examples. The problem with scams today and misinformation today is it's so sophisticated. It's not just there's websites and social proof and all of those things to back it up, or at least the perception of it. So the thing that I think we're all becoming a little bit more is critical thinkers and questioning everything, although not everybody. But we also have very polarizing points of view too, so it's creating more conflict. And again, more reason why people are fitting into tribes when they find like-minded people is because actually, if you look at everything on the in the news today, or even on social media, they're amplifying the extreme points of view, which normalizes them, and therefore we become even more polarized. So it's fascinating times. This is a societal problem, not just a marketing problem.
Yes.
If people are more skeptical, if people are more resistant to ideas or concepts, whatever, because of the way we're being conditioned, our environment is conditioning that behaviour, then as a marketer, your emphasis needs to be on demonstrating value, demonstrating expertise, demonstrating good quality customer experiences, demonstrating, with perhaps more in-depth case studies, the journey that you take customers on from A to B, demonstrating maybe the framework that you work with so they can understand what the journey is going to look like if they work with you. All of that's important. You've got to reassure people. And coming back to the point I was making yesterday, we're trying to create certainty in the mind's eye of the person, of the prospect. So if we want them to make that decision to work with us, we've got to tick all of those different boxes, which could be uncertainty. And as I say, I think it's a broader problem today. Marketing isn't just about a tagline or a good image. Marketing is about actually demonstrating value, demonstrating values, and telling the story of the business, so people feel completely reassured and more inclined to buy.
Okay, good. I'm 100% with you. I've also got a great instance of this, I think, where I used to run these half-day workshops, and they were open to anyone to come to, and I run them in 4 or 5 locations across the southeast. So there's one of these things happening every week, and I've lost 2 people from those. Like 2 people have walked out of the hundreds of people who came. One of them really didn't like the Mexican wave, so I used to make them do a Mexican wave at the beginning, and they would go one way and everyone would go away, and then they'd go the other way and everyone would go away. And I used to follow them on my phone to get the video for my social media. And as I went back, this guy was literally packing up his stuff and leaving. So that's one thing. That's one person that I lost. The other person that I lost was an architect. And he left, I think, he left at halfway because, this was 2008 to 2011, somewhere around there. So one of the courses was social media. And I was talking about one of the effects of social media being the democratization of knowledge. So actually now, if you want something to be true, historically, you'd have to get it published in an encyclopedia. Now you put it up on Wikipedia, and if enough people believe you, it's true, So this was my argument. And he resisted that, saying, but I was at college for 7 years. Well, I know the truth. All right, my knowledge is more valuable. And he left at half time. But the fact is that was entirely true. And Trump blew the lid off it because he basically came out and said, the newspapers are lying to you, it's fake news. And of course they are. They're hugely bipartisan and they decide what they want to say and how they want to say it. So the very nature of truth, like we touched on philosophy at the beginning yesterday, but the very nature of truth is, completely blown apart. It's like, what on earth do you believe? And it has forced everyone out to these two extremes. And we're carrying on here. We're doing a podcast about marketing like governments aren't being ridiculously over demanding in terms of the way they expect people to behave and what they expect them to do. That's an aside. We don't need to get into that today.
Well, the interesting point is governments still have marketing and PR, right? They
Yes.
still need to be. They need re-election. So everything they deliver to you, every single piece of information, is cushioned and maybe embellished or slightly distorted to present the best possible side of any one situation. So it's still all marketing. It just doesn't have the kind of commercial element to it. That's all.
Okay, and so this is interesting. I don't know, 5 or 6 of these chats ago, I spoke to Melanie Farmer, who works for an agency that is advising the Australian government on what's going on currently and how and health authorities on how they should be behaving and stuff. And then what's gone on since that conversation in Australia is just mind-boggling, unbelievable what's going on there. The point is, this is probably the biggest, and depending on where you sit on the scale, the most necessary marketing campaign in human history. And 20 or 30% of people are just saying, no, we don't believe you. We're not doing it and we don't believe you.
Yeah, I don't think that's the fault personally of the marketing aspect. I think it comes back to this societal problem that you'll always have outsiders, but the batshit crazy extreme points of view in any discussion or argument are the ones that are amplified and and therefore normalised, right? So there's a much bigger distance on the two extremes now, I think, than there ever was. But I firmly believe common sense still lives in the middle. And the problem is, the cliche common sense isn't common practice is kind of what we have right now.
Yes.
Without getting drawn into COVID too much, you only have to have a look at the rates of people who are dying in hospitals and the percentage of those which are unvaccinated right now. But if you can just then call it fake news and diminish all of the evidence. And for those that don't want to dig deeper and do their due diligence, they're satisfied with that very superficial throwaway comment. Then you've got a challenge because it's okay to want to educate, but if people don't want to be educated, if they're not going to ask the questions, if they don't have the curiosity, then how do you give them the necessary knowledge they need to make an informed decision? And it's a real problem. And bringing it back to marketing. Your architect delegate who packed up and left was missing the point altogether, because had he realised actually there is misinformation and I know the truth, so therefore I'm going to make my platform about telling people where the misinformation is and giving them the correct knowledge and information, and therefore I'll be the trusted resource. There's a way he could frame and position that in order to solve the problem. And he chose not to. He chose to pack up his things, go away, and bury his head in the sand, right? Which is typical of a lot of people who either can't be bothered to learn or are resistant to the change. I find that kind of fascinating, and I think there's also been one massive paradigm shift when it comes to knowledge, right? Once upon a time, the people who held positions of power, or at least had longevity in organisations, were the people who held their cards close to their chest and retained all the knowledge for themselves, so they were indispensable. And what's happened now today is organisations value the people who bring the cards out and upskill everybody around them. They're the people who are valuable in an organisation, not the ones that try and guard all of that information for themselves. It's a very old way of thinking. And in marketing, the way that's translated to is certainly in the professional services arena, where people are selling knowledge, consultancy skills, etc. They're giving away a whole load of knowledge up front to demonstrate they know what they're talking about. because most of the time people still want their hand held through the process. They don't necessarily want to take a bit of knowledge shared on a website or in a presentation and go and implement it themselves. They just want to be reassured that the person knows what they're talking about. So it's okay if one person leaves from a Mexican wave because they probably weren't a values match, and that's fine. You can't please everybody. Work with the people that want to work with you and like your style and like your way of doing things.
Yes.
That's the best we can do. Be really attractive to them.
Yes. And 100%. And the thing about the democratization of knowledge is what I was saying to people then. I don't know if I would say it now. Obviously, the world's changed. But I was saying, like, here's the opportunity. If knowledge is becoming so much more vague, or truth essentially is becoming so much more vague, people are going to be looking for authority. And if you can be the authority in your market, I suppose this is coming towards where you guys are, then there is a huge opportunity. Exactly like you're saying, put the considerations and the answers in front of people so they are much better equipped to make the right decisions about what they buy. I just worry, and I do worry, and I was having this conversation with my dad a couple of days ago about if there's a if there were to be an election in the UK now, like the Conservative Party, irrespective of what your politics might be, have shown themselves to be hideously corrupt. They're essentially like all their mates made tens of millions like this time last year, and they're all in the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies, and they all had us out applauding on our doorsteps for the NHS that they've underfunded for the last 10 years. So by any sane measure, there is no way that they should be re-elected. But anyone who knows anything about British politics know that they will be re-elected, and probably by a landslide. So I think this is the what's the word? This is the paradox, it seems to me, of marketing, is that actually you don't have to present as being the nicest or even the best. If there's something else going on, then that also works for you. Have we gone too far down this rabbit hole?
Well, no. I'm perfectly happy with it. It's whether you are. I personally think that actually, when you get people together and certainly give them any kind of sense of power, you'll start to get a distortion or corruption.
Yes.
Okay. So whatever party is in power, there's probably going to be some level of corruption. Right. How much it is a different thing, and you only have to look at US politics, which is arguably one of the most corrupt political systems on the planet. Arguably,
I would say so.
Just to when people can buy votes, there's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it's as much about what I can't stand is the hypocrisy, right? If you're somebody who values truth, and you're an anti-vaxxer, for example, in the US, and it's because you don't trust what you're being told about what the vaccine can do, and you only care about truth. But in the next breath, you'll go and take a cattle dewormer tablet because somebody on Facebook said it's good for it, or whatever Trump, I can't pronounce it. What's the hydroxychloroquine or something like that? Something like that. Yeah, I can't pronounce it. But if you're going to go and take that just because someone said that it might do something for you, your level of evidence was always low. You're just choosing a side, right? And that's the problem. So it's the hypocrisy. We care about truth, and in the next breath you're going to do this. Or the anti-masker who cares about freedom, but in the next breath is trying to rip somebody else's mask off their face. So clearly doesn't care about other people's freedom. It's the hypocrisy in all of these things which is the challenge. And the problem for you and I, right, is because we by just having this conversation, we are probably definitely expressing our values, but we're probably expressing what side of the fence that we fall, and that in its own right, in today's day and age, will polarize a little bit, because some people will have a different point of view, and they might see that you don't lean conservative, and probably lean more to Lib Dem or Labour if you were voting in the UK.
God help me.
They would see that I'm vaccinated and quite unopposed to wearing masks. They can see where we fall. So we will, just in our everyday conversations, we'll give a flavour of who we are, and we'll polarise to some extent. And that's life. You can't please everybody. And if you spend your time pleasing people who aren't a good match for you, I guarantee they won't have the best customer experience, and you will spend more time and energy trying to make them happy than you do the people who genuinely like working with you.
Yes.
And become the advocates. So the key, I think, is really identifying who works well with you and putting your attention and focus on them. And for me, marketing is about creating the conditions where the right people buy from you.
Good, 100%. Now I've got a quote which will be the title on YouTube. Where are we? What minute of day 2 are we on? We're on minute 32. Cool. I'm really interested. What I'm interested in is kind of, it seems to me that there are, what do we call them? I want to call them platitudes that are just kind of rolled out, and everyone kind of accepts them. And I just wonder how much of it actually is, when we're talking about marketing, because you brilliantly brought it back to marketing. Thank you for that. But like, for example, like, what does Seth Godin say? Seth Godin, I tell you who says, what's his name? The mouthy New Yorker guy, Vaynerchuk.
Gary V?
Gary Vaynerchuk, yeah. So he says, or he is cited as quoting, give them value, give them value, give them value, and close the sale or something. Now, the issue might be, well, there's 2 issues with that potentially. Is one, what if by the time you've given them value 3 times, they don't need any more value from you? So whatever amount of time you've invested or energy or product you've invested in satisfying that value 3 times might have satisfied their need for value entirely, and they go away and you don't make the sale. So that's the first issue. And then secondly, it seems to me, because this comes back to Cialdini's influence, and one of the 6, whatever he calls them, keys, is reciprocity. So if somebody feels like they owe you, then they're more likely to do what you're hoping to influence them to do. But it seems to me, and I don't know if this has changed, because obviously I've only lived my life, but it seems to me that people have quite a different capacity to accept now in 2021, like without reciprocating, than they might have done 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. What do you think?
So there's several points in there. I'll start actually though with the one around the give value, close, right?
Yes.
What's kind of interesting, we talked yesterday about how there was blurred lines between marketing and selling, right? And there were some really good stats came out. I think it was Gartner that produced them, but happy to share them with you for footnotes on the page. I'll go and dig out the research. But essentially it talks about the amount of touch points you need to have with a prospect before they buy. And the fact that the vast majority of salespeople give up after 4 or 5 interactions, and 80% of people buy after the 11th interaction.
Brilliant.
So loads of people leaving work on the table because they're just not seeing through. And that touch point isn't necessarily value, but it's a demonstration of care. Just wanted to check in with you. Have you got everything you need? Are there any other questions you need me to answer while you're making your decision? I'm not pushing you, just want to make sure that you've got everything you need. So expressing a duty of care and having that conversation, again, just pushes people towards that certainty. And so, different products and services, as I say, some things are just commoditized. And, I don't have to think about a telephone case. Although I might look at the reviews on Amazon, but it's not really much of a considered purchase. However, if I was going to go and book a consultant to come and work in the business, I would definitely be making sure they had the credentials on the experience and the, at least a knowledge of the industry I operate in or the profession I operate in. So that, there's different levels of considerations depending on what you're buying. And as far as reciprocity is concerned, I actually do have a chapter on this in my book, so I call it the law of reciprocity. And I still think it holds true, but it's certainly more of an issue for people the deeper your relationship with them. So if you've got a first level superficial relationship, in one of those early touch points, they're less likely to reciprocate. But if if you're at the stage where you know people's names and you've had an exchange of ideas or conversations, you're more likely to get reciprocity. And I also put it down to because it's kind of that obligation to work with the people that have done something nice for us. Those professions which give you a 15-minute free consultation are more likely to be the ones that get the business, because not only are they giving them some initial free advice, but they're taking the time to ask the questions so they can give a contextualized answer. Or they're taking the time to build rapport, which means you've got now a bit of a sense of obligation to work with them. So it's how, as marketeers, we give them that sense of who we are and start to build that sense of obligation with them, so they then do honour us with their business.
Brilliant. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to believe that. This is a great example that you've given me, which is one that I've always, not always, but I came to a point where I questioned it, which is this thing about persistence, was the amount of touch points it might be required to win a customer. And people give up too easily is always the moral of that story. And the most famous example of this, like the public speakers roll out all the time, is Colonel Sanders. And whether it was the 87th door that he knocked on, accepted that he really had delicious fried chicken, and so he went on to become we know, because we're marketers in 2021, that very often, and this is kind of what I think is probably the desired for small businesses, but we know because we buy things with one touch point. I will go to Google, I'll Google the thing that I need, and if it's at the top, either of the ads or of the search, and I click through and it's easy to do, I will do that. I won't have any sense of the business. I won't have any relationship with the business. I won't do any due diligence necessarily. I won't know if they're relying on child slave labor or, any of these horrible things, because I'm just getting what I want and what I need. And for me and Robert, historically, but not so much more recently, it seems, for me, marketing is about cost of customer acquisition and customer lifetime value. And that's what brings the objectivity that small businesses and businesses need to really understand marketing and drive marketing effectively. So telling people, like, you might get lucky on the 87th attempt, for me, I'd say, you haven't understood the market, you haven't understood what they need, you're not presenting it in the right way, don't persist, have a look at what you're doing maybe and try and do something a bit differently. Do you know what I mean? So that about touch points.
It's funny actually you mentioned Robert, because I've got a lovely story about Robert as an example for how he has understood the audience and then tailored something for them. In fact, let me here you go. Here's his book. So this is one of Robert Craven's books, right? Grow Your Service Firm.
Yes.
Okay. So on this side is a list of different professional service type of organisations. So I'm missing the camera.
That's okay.
You might be able to see if you're watching, right? So a whole load of different types. So this is a book written a bit as a generalist book for how to grow a service firm. And and Robert won't mind me saying, it did only okay. Okay. He then took this whole of the contents of this book and he specifically changed the word service firm for digital agency, one of the aspects on the book. And as a result of that kind of niche positioning, that repositioning to focus on one audience and to be highly relevant to that one audience, he now gets flown all over the world by Google to train digital agencies on how to grow their practice, because they're clever enough to know that if a digital agency grows their business, chances are they've got more customers spending more money on ad spend.
Yes.
And therefore they grow their business alongside it. For me, that's a brilliant story for Robert. He sold more copies with it being specific than he has being generalist. And it created much, much bigger opportunities which see him travel the world, But it's honing in on that audience rather than trying to be a generalist.
Exactly.
That's the key.
And so this is we're on the same page. We're not even arguing at this point, which is refreshing. So the thing is, absolutely. So let's not tell Robert when he puts out his How to Be a Good Service Business to keep persisting. He needs 11 touch points, so he might need to produce 11 books for this market. Let's tell Robert, think about what you're doing, niche down if there's an opportunity to do it, get more targeted, get more focused. That is much better than saying, well, just persist. Because I think the danger of that is that businesses are going out of business because they're being told to persist when probably they shouldn't. I mean, that's the danger. The other end of that danger is that people aren't persisting and they're leaving, like you say, work on the table because they're not chasing things hard enough. And the other thing I think about that is that the harder you have to work to win a customer, to convince them to buy from you, the harder it is going to be to retain that customer. So really, however many touch points there might need to be, probably the fewer touch points there are, the better the fit or the relationship or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the more that you show an understanding of their particular circumstances. I mean, let's face it. Contextual marketing has been around for many, many years, right?
Yeah.
And typically, it was in the kind of digital space. And just for anybody watching who doesn't know what contextual marketing is, it's the simple premise that every time we make a buying decision, there's a context to it. So I might go out and buy. And by the way, I believe it context is important in any communication, not just digital engagement. So, for example, I could go out and buy a new car, and it could be that I'm having a midlife crisis and I want a convertible. It could be that there's a new child in the family, God forbid, mine have left home, but we need more space. It could be that I've had a crash and I need a quick replacement because I've got somewhere to be. Whatever, there's a context to my buying decision. So the key thing for any decent marketeer or salesperson even, is to ask great questions and really actually understand the context of the people they serve, because then they can match features and benefits and tell stories and give examples and really hone in on fulfilling their need. You've got much more chance of making the sale. So for me, context is just everything in that buying decision. So if you are specialising, operating in a niche, or multiple niches, by the way, but what you're doing is you're selecting aspects of your audience and you're talking directly to them with examples directly to them. That's the stuff that's important.
100%.
That's the stuff that wins. In fact, there's a book or a beautiful example of this. There's a chap who died in 2012 called Jim Slater, and he was an investor, an investment thought leader, right? And his whole philosophy on investing was to go and take a really small industry and learn that industry inside and out. So you know all of the movers and shakers, all the activity, all the things that are happening, because you're more likely to make a good informed investment decision if you know all of the moving parts of one specialist area of industry, as opposed to being a generalist and investing everything. You're more likely to not have decent specialist knowledge and therefore make one or two bad decisions, right? So that was his philosophy, was to focus on one area and concentrate on that. And there's a lovely story. He had a book called The Zulu Principle. And it's a lovely story of him sat in his conservatory one Sunday afternoon in Surrey, reading the Sunday Times. And his wife is sat next to him reading the supplement magazine for the Sunday Times. And in there was a 4-page spread on Zulus. And so she's reading this article with real interest. And she finishes the article, she ponders, and she interrupts him. And she starts telling him about what she's just read because she's fascinated by it. And the way he articulates it in the book is, in that moment, I was fascinated that she was the biggest expert on Zulus in our household. And had she probably walked to the local library and got a book out on the subject, chances are she'd be the biggest expert on Zulus in the town. And, had she gone to a university or flown to South Africa and spent some time on a Zulu reserve or in the university there and studied for a couple of months, chances are she'd be one of the foremost experts on Zulus in the world. Right? And I liked how that was illustrated, because from a business point of view, too many people spend their time being generalists when actually it doesn't take much to demonstrate to a subset of your audience that you have specialist knowledge and you understand them. And even going back a few years back, I ran a business community in the UK, and we had a member in Berkshire who was an IT support company. And they were generalists. So anybody who had a computer, they would profess to be able to support. And their marketing was just always generalist, month after month after month. And then one month they did a case study where they just did an example with a veterinary surgery that they'd signed up. And what astounded them was in the month that followed, they signed up 2 or 3 other veterinary surgeries. because suddenly they saw content that was highly contextual and relevant to them, so it got their attention. And a year later, they had 19 veterinary surgeries on the book and a whole part of their website dedicated to that specialist IT support. And what they were demonstrating to them is, we know the proprietary software used to manage your practice. We know, the pressures you're under if the appointment system goes down, etc., etc. They demonstrated that they knew exactly the type of support they needed, and therefore they grew that aspect of the business. And no surprising, a year after that, they had another niche part of the business, which was dentist practices, which are very similar to veterinary practices in the way they're organised and run. And that's how they built actually a really good business, by specialising in one or two areas and demonstrating to them they knew and understood them.
Exactly. And when you go down the road with that style of business, then you do get more specialised knowledge, and you do become more experienced. So 100% I agree with that. And 100% I agree with what you're saying about what I tell my students, my digital marketing students, is that being an effective digital marketer, or any kind of marketer, is just an exercise of knowing your market and your customers better and better and better. And the more effectively you can do that, the more effectively you will be marketing and the more successful you will be. And so I think, I don't set out with an agenda, but what I'm kind of taking away from this conversation is that there is a real question that should be asked, which is, no, I'm not going to ask the question. I'm going to say, if you're an effective marketer, if you're really good at understanding your market and your customers and delivering the things they need and giving them a good experience, then really this whole communicating your purpose and your ethics and trying to convince people that you're a good company, certainly for a small or medium-sized business, isn't necessary, because it's like people who put out content. Like the last conversation I had was with a small business SEO guy targeting small businesses specifically, but he's telling his customers to produce content to answer the questions that people have, so that I don't know. We're going to have to draw a line because we've gone almost the game for another hour, but I'm going to let you obviously have it.
Okay, so I'm going to have one last word though. So I don't agree with what you've just said at the end there, which is around, even if you are a small business today, I think you have to be demonstrating values in your marketing and your communication. I think it's really important, because I think there's a whole generation who look for people who are values aligned with them. But I do think that Barnaby Winter put this really lovely on an event that we did recently, where he said the problem today, though, there are threshold values that every business must adhere to, because actually, people are thinking more and more values driven, whether they're the brand or the consumer. People are thinking more and more brand driven. So there are threshold values that we all must have, but you must also give a bit about who you are individually. That's my slight pushback. And I may have misunderstood you, by the way, but it has been a laugh, my friend. I really enjoyed it.
It has been fun, isn't it? Everyone says it's been fun, but because I think people don't trust us. So what I'm hoping to achieve in this process is to get people who know a lot about marketing and really challenge them, so people can see actually this is their experience that they believe. Do you know what I mean? This is their... it's not just marketing faff. Do you know what I mean? Because marketing is guilty of that. And I want small businesses, particularly, because I'm on the side of small businesses, to understand and value and invest in marketing and sales, because there is no other way to be successful in business, So that's what I'm trying to achieve with this. And I love that everyone says at the end that it was really good fun, because I feel like I'm being a bit of an arsehole most of the time, but everyone seems to enjoy it.
No, this type of kind of real conversation, as opposed to, this is the type of thing I can imagine having a pint in the pub with you, Martin. So that's for me, that's a good podcast interview, when you feel like you've just been sat in a pub chewing the fat.
Excellent. Thank you so much, man. So thank you for this. I don't feel like we've come to the end. We might have to have another conversation in the future.
Always willing to come back. There's a load of other stuff I'm opinionated on as well. So.
Excellent. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to remind you, don't let this close until it's fully uploaded. Don't close this window. Warren, thank you, man. Thank you so much for this. I've really enjoyed it also. It's been really good fun, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Likewise, buddy. Take care.
Thanks, man. Bye.